In today's gospel, Jesus sums up his entire teaching with one commandment: love one another as I have loved you. Love is the bond of existence between God, Jesus, and his followers. This agape love is a love which moves outward to give of oneself to others. So, a question I would like to ask today is, what does this love look like in an era of ecological breakdown? When Pope Francis published Laudato Si in 2015 on care for our common home, he addressed it to every single person living on this planet. He addressed it to you and to me. Laudato Si is a rallying call to the world, since the environmental crisis we are undergoing and its human roots concern and affect us all. I'd like to share with you the story of a climate pilgrimage. In 2018, I walked 1,000 kilometers on a climate pilgrimage from Italy to Poland to the UN climate talks, COP24, with pilgrims from many countries, carrying the message of Laudato Si to those we met along the way. In our group were pilgrims from the Philippines, some of whom were survivors of one of the strongest storms ever to make landfall in recorded history, known as Typhoon Haiyan. Haiyan struck the Philippines in 2013. It killed 10,000 people in just 2 hours and displaced millions of others. The strength of this storm is attributed to the climate crisis. My friend and fellow pilgrim, Joanna Sistento, lost her entire family that night. Her parents, her brother, her sister-in-law, and her 3-year-old nephew washed away by the storm surge. Journeying with these pilgrims over 2 months across Europe really opened my eyes to the realities of the ecological crisis our world faces today. The crisis for me is no longer something happening to people far away whom I do not know. This involves my friends, our brothers and sisters, real people, real families, real grief, people who are on the front lines of climate change. We're also more than aware that as well as a climate crisis, our world faces a devastating biodiversity crisis, as the vast ecosystems of our planet are unraveling. The origins of the COVID-19 pandemic are now being attributed by scientists to the destruction of these vast ecosystems. It's a devastating example of how human beings cannot be healthy on a planet that is not healthy. The facts and statistics go on and on. They can be overwhelming and leave us feeling helpless. Jesus preached agape love. This is a radical love, which urges us to act for all those who are oppressed in any way. This includes people suffering the disastrous effects of the ecological crisis, and it also includes the generations who are coming after us. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis pleads with us to embrace an ecological conversion, where the effects of our encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in our relationship with the world around us. He says living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. It's not an optional or a secondary aspect of our Christian experience. Laudato Si invites us to begin this eco-conversion very simply by reconnecting with the natural world. The roots of this crisis are deeply spiritual because we've forgotten who we are and where we've come from. So part of this call to love one another involves rekindling a childlike sense of awe and wonder where our relationship with creation is concerned. Laudato Si invites us to take example from the much-loved St. Francis of Assisi. It says, just as what happens when we fall in love with someone, whenever St. Francis would gaze at the sun, the moon, or the smallest of animals, he burst into song, drawing all other creatures into his praise. We're invited to a real movement of the heart, where we can begin to see the risen Christ present in all of creation, to see the fingerprints of God in the forests, in a wildflower, in a blade of grass, in the depth of life beneath the seas. We read in Laudato Si, the entire material universe speaks of God's love, his boundless affection for us. Soil, water, mountains, everything is, as it were, a caress of God. This is where we begin, reconnecting, because we cannot protect what we do not love. Jesus was in constant touch with nature, lending it an attention full of fondness and wonder. He walked everywhere. He went to quiet places to pray, such as to mountain tops. He preached from boats on the water. His followers included fishermen who were in tune with the rhythm of the sea. The New Testament does not only tell us of the earthly Jesus and his tangible, loving relationship with the world, it also shows him risen and glorious, present throughout creation. The risen one mysteriously holds all creatures to himself and directs them towards fullness. Laudato Si says, "The very flowers of the field and the birds which Christ's human eyes contemplated and admired are now imbued with his radiant presence." To be followers of Jesus, to love one another, involves embracing the joy of Christ in all of creation and walking more gently on this earth. We are called to be guardians and protectors of God's creation. The Easter story is one of transformation, and it calls us to hope. Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish climate activist, rightly says, "Hope is found in action. When we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then the hope will come." Signs of resurrection are all around us, where people are living out this call to love one another in hope-filled action. I find hope when I see parishes and faith communities signing up to be eco-communities. I see love of neighbour when I see young people rising up to call politicians to account on the failure to address this crisis. I find hope when I see a local parish turning their lawn into a wildflower meadow. I see love of neighbour when a parish centre implements recycling stations. I find hope when people of faith come together to plant trees wherever they can. I see and hear love of neighbour when our liturgies lament the destruction of biodiversity and our prayers invite communities to respond to the cry of the earth. I find hope wherever people are living out the call of Pope Francis to a profound interior conversion where our relationship with God's creation is concerned. So this Easter season, let us commit to transformation, to really reflect on how we will emerge from this pandemic onto a different path. Like the psalmist today in our readings, we are invited to sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done wondrous deeds. Sing joyfully to the Lord, sing praise. Truly much can be done.